So here's how it all connects. And trust me, once you see it laid out in full, you'll realize this was never four separate stories. It was one slow-burning fuse, lit in a hotel room in September 2024, that finally stopped smoking backstage in Las Vegas this past week. It started with a phone call. Diddy, sitting in a New York City hotel room 6 days before federal agents came for him, telling someone on the other end of the line that they needed to find people willing to operate in the dirtiest corners of their business because they were losing. He didn't know that call was being captured. He didn't know that the footage of those 6 days, him riding a bicycle through Harlem, greeting fans, strategizing with lawyers, performing calm for the cameras he'd always controlled, would end up in the hands of the one man in the industry who had been waiting the longest to tell his story. Director Alexandria Stapleton later explained that the footage arrived legally, that Combs had always been obsessed with filming himself across every chapter of his life, and that the team moved quietly to protect whoever handed it over. 50 Cent's own read on what that footage exposed was simple and cold. Combs had been documenting his own descent toward incarceration without fully grasping that other hands would eventually control the narrative he was building. That's the foundation. Now, here's where it gets complicated. Because 50 didn't just drop a trailer and walk away clean when Netflix surprise released the teaser for Sean Combs.
That'll work with us. That has dealt in the dirtiest of dirty business. We're losing.
The Reckoning on December 1st, 2025. The four-part series was framed as a career-spanning examination of Combs' ascent as hip-hop's most powerful architect and the wreckage he allegedly left behind, built on exclusive interviews with people who had never spoken publicly before. 50 had been developing the project since December 2023, committed to having all proceeds directed toward the victims named in Combs mounting civil suits, and worked through 5 months of groundwork before bringing in Emmy-winning director Alexandria Stapleton to helm it. The series landed on Netflix December 2nd. Within 6 days, it had pulled 21.8 million views, sitting second on the platform that week, behind only Stranger Things Season 5. Critics on Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 90% approval rating, calling it meticulous rather than sensational. The word sober kept appearing in reviews written by people clearly shaken by what they'd watched. Among the documentary's most staggering disclosures was testimony from Bad Boy Entertainment co-founder Kirk Burrows, who alleged that Combs bore indirect responsibility for Biggie Smalls' murder, claiming that Combs insisted Biggie remain on the West Coast despite his visible discomfort following Tupac's death because Combs wanted to celebrate, and that insistence placed Biggie in the location where he was shot and killed. That's not buried in the margins.
Biggie's Rolling Stone cover after his death, and Kirk Burrows witnessed it happen after Biggie died in 1997.
That's a co-founder of the label on camera, drawing a line between Combs' desire to party and the death of the most celebrated rapper of his generation. But here's the thing about powerful documentaries. They don't just inform, they activate. 7 days after the release, Marlon Wayans sat down on Real 92.3's Cruise show, and when asked about the series, suggested that 50's long-running personal history with Combs made the whole enterprise a bias problem dressed in documentary clothing, and that the energy a man throws into the universe has a way of cycling back. He wasn't defending Diddy. He'd say that louder later. He was questioning who was holding the camera and why. 50 didn't let that breathe for a moment. He went straight to Instagram and posted a frame of Marlon from White Chicks, his 2004 film, with a blunt caption.
Hey, yo! You do that again, I'm a bust!
Telling him to keep his name out of his mouth. That was the opening shot. What followed over the next several days was the kind of public exchange that reminds you social media was built for exactly this kind of chaos. Marlon fired back with an AI-generated image of 50 and Diddy together in a hot tub, captioning it as a correction of narratives. 50 responded by surfacing Marlon's Pride photo shoot, a real, non-AI moment, and pointed out that no digital manipulation was necessary when genuine photos already told the story he wanted told.
On the type of parties that I go to. I don't frequent those type of parties. And even if I go, like I said, I'd never...
Making matters sharper for Marlon, 50 also resurfaced a years-old tweet where Wayans had celebrated 15 years of attending Diddy's parties, calling them legendary gatherings that never disappointed. Marlon's counter, that he always left early and never witnessed the conduct now at the center of Combs' conviction, was harder to land once that tweet started circulating again. Wayans released a video clarifying that he had never defended Combs.
All right, so I'm going to make it abundantly clear. I'm not here defending Diddy.
Had been pulled into the debate by a question he answered honestly and urged people not to let the framing of his words become a second documentary in itself, which was, ironically, precisely the critique he'd leveled at The Reckoning from the start. The circular logic of that moment was almost too perfect. 50 eventually posted an AI-edited scene from Friday, with Marlon cast in it, declaring he was finished engaging and that Marlon wasn't funny enough to keep the attention. In classic form, even the white flag came with a punchline stitched to it. Wayans, for his part, said the whole thing had been nothing more than two men doing the dozens in public, the bully on the block and the funny kid trading verbal shots the way people used to do on street corners before everything became evidence. Then his brothers stepped in. Damon Wayans delivered the message through the family group chat. You are 43 years old. You picked a fight with the biggest man in the building, a man who absorbed 9 bullets and kept accumulating power, when there were perfectly manageable options like Soulja Boy and Kevin Hart available for conflict. That's the kind of perspective only a sibling can hand you without it sounding like defeat. Marlon took it. In a later interview, he described the moment of clarity, sitting with a cigar, asking himself whether two successful black men fighting in public was the cultural image he wanted attached to his name heading into Scary Movie 6. It wasn't. He let it go. Now, skip forward to April 18th, 2026, Las Vegas. Both men were present at the industry convention for entirely separate reasons. Marlon there was Cent-Wayans and Anna Faris to debut the Scary Movie 6 trailer. 50 there as part of the Street Fighter cast pushing a film hitting theaters in October. 2 projects, 2 stages, 1 hallway connecting both worlds. They crossed paths backstage, and what witnesses described was the atmosphere shifting almost immediately from wary to relaxed. The 2 men joking together, addressing the months-long online exchange between themselves, with the kind of ease that only comes when neither party was ever truly invested in damage. A source who had a direct view of the moment framed it plainly. Nobody at an event like CinemaCon is going to sacrifice business momentum over something that was always entertainment at its core. Cent-Wayans was there. No cameras staged the moment. No statements followed it. Just 2 men in a corridor laughing at something that had already become smaller than both of them. And here's what that backstage hallway actually confirms. Not about their relationship, but about the bigger picture it's attached to. NPR's hip-hop correspondent Rodney Carmichael noted that The Reckoning appeared designed to accomplish what the prosecution couldn't fully achieve in a courtroom, constructing a narrative in which Combs' decades of success are reframed as having come at the sustained expense of the people around him. That's a heavy sentence. It's also an accurate description of what 4 episodes of documentary filmmaking can do that a jury trial, constrained by burden of proof, cannot. Joe Budden, who had expressed significant empathy for Combs during the trial, watched the documentary and came away saying, Combs didn't receive nearly enough time for what the footage showed. That's not a small shift. That's a complete reversal from someone who had publicly resisted the prevailing narrative for months.
Is the Puff Daddy piece executive produced by 50 Cent? I don't even think that's fair because...
And if you want to understand how we got from a polished, celebrated mogul to a man being documented by a lifelong rival from inside a hotel room 6 days before his arrest, you have to go back to what existed before. The Reckoning rewrote the frame. And a Fristing NTEB. The clearest contrast is Can't Stop, Won't Stop, a bad boy story. A documentary that followed Combs through the label's 20th anniversary reunion concert, portraying him as a visionary and a perfectionist, with cameras he controlled and questions that never pushed past the surface. Watch that now. after the reckoning, and the same man in the same industry looks like a completely different person, because what changed wasn't the footage. What changed was who was asking the questions. TMZ's downfall of Diddy moved fast and loud, stitching together allegations and court filings with the urgency of a breaking news ticker, leaving no space for character analysis or the kind of slow accumulation of detail that actually changes minds. It captured the moment. It didn't change the conversation. The reckoning did something structurally different. It built a case not just against a man, but against the machinery that protected him, the silence, the contracts, the industry's collective decision to keep the music moving, regardless of the cost attached to it. 50 Cent told Netflix's Tudum that his commitment through G-Unit Film and Television had always been to real storytelling, and that he was grateful to the people who trusted his team with what they carried. Whether you read that as genuine or strategic depends on how generously you've been following Curtis Jackson's career. Both readings can be true simultaneously. What can't be argued is the outcome. A documentary executive produced by a man with a documented personal conflict with its subject polled 21 million viewers in less than a week, shifted public perception measurably, and sparked a subsidiary cultural argument between 50 Cent and Marlon Wayans that became its own news cycle before dissolving into a laughing handshake backstage at a movie convention in the Nevada desert. Neither side issued a formal statement after the CinemaCon encounter. The tone of the meeting made statements unnecessary. Whatever had been performing as friction between them had already run its course. That's the full arc. A phone call captured in secret, a trailer that stopped the internet, a documentary that moved 21 million people, a public beef that started on a podcast, escalated through memes, got ended by a family group chat, and finally exhaled itself into silence in a Las Vegas hallway. And Diddy, still in federal prison, still appealing, still the subject of over 70 active civil suits, still the reason two men who'd never truly been enemies found themselves briefly playing the part on the internet. Because that's what his story does now. It pulls everyone who ever stood near it into its orbit, whether they plan to be there or not. The chapter between 50 and Marlon is closed. The chapter this all came from is nowhere near finished.